Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm coming to you from my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce one of my favorite local actors, or as he calls himself, local thespians. And he's Alex McDonald Villarreal, who's an actor, writer, does a whole bunch of other things as well. Before we begin, Alex, why don't you give everybody a big wave and say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
And that is Alex McDonald Villarreal. And Alex, rather than me read about your background, if I could ask you to kind of just give you a Reader's Digest version of your background, keeping it under 2 hours. Okay, if
Okay.
you would. Okay, but how would you get to where you are now?
Well, I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I went to college at Texas State University, and then I worked out in California for PCPA Theater Fest, and then came back to Texas, worked in Austin for several years before I got a job working in Asheville for Bright Star Touring Theater, and I worked for them 2011, 2012. And at the end of 2012, by that point, I'd fallen in love with Asheville. It was like a smaller version of Austin, but in the mountains with seasons. And I'd never had that in Texas. So moved here right at the end of that tour, end of 2012, right at the beginning of 2013. And I worked with Montford Park Players, and then was also working at a restaurant that no longer exists. It was O'Charlie's off of Tunnel
Okay,
Road, and then I worked my way up into management, and I got into restaurant management for about 11 years. Um, and I was only able to do a play like maybe once every 3 years once I became a manager. So until I got into daytime restaurants, and now finally, I have a remote job, a hybrid job where I'm able to still do theater at night and on the weekends. Finally,
it's funny you mentioned O'Charlie's. I think that's where I first met you. I remember
yeah,
that. Okay, I really liked that place, but I guess when you were gone, it was never the same. It went
that's right.
downhill after
It
that.
went downhill after I left, of course.
But that's really good point. So yeah, as an actor, I guess it is kind of hard to be working in a restaurant at the same time. And remember, you don't. I always ask you, you do one show every so often. I ask you when's the next show, and it would be every so often. So you then quit O'Charlie's, or you're no longer at Charlie's. When did that happen? A couple of years ago?
That was, I think I left in 2019 because I went to Luella's
I
Barbecue.
remember. Yeah.
And then, we got through the pandemic and all that. And then 2022, I really started to get back out into theater. I did a show with Nemesis. We did Midsummer for Haters that summer. And then that winter, I was doing um, the Wickhams, Christmas at Pemberley. And then I'd left to be able to keep up with shows like that, to be able to keep doing more theater. I left Luella's and worked at Green Sage Cafe, which was a daytime restaurant. And so I was able to do all that and continue. And, went from Green Sage to First Watch, same idea, like daytime restaurant, so I could do theater at night. The difficulty became like the weekends. So eventually I was able to find a job that's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with hour lunch break, weekends off.
It's funny you mentioning the shows because I'm thinking out loud. I probably have seen you in a whole bunch of them, if not most of them.
Yeah.
What I love watching you as a performer, Alex, is you kind of like always different, and I really appreciate that fact about you. I guess and I'll ask you the same question, but for me, it's hard to stereotype you. I see you as doing a wide range of performances. Would you say that's true about you?
Yeah, especially like since I've been in Asheville, like it's been a whole range of things. I've played, you know, minor characters for comedy. I've played the lead roles, like Benedict in Much Ado with Montford Park Players. I've done the bad guy with the Wickhams with Multiverse Theater, and then but yeah, and then also flip side, we also went back to do Miss Bennett, and I got to be Mr. Bingley, which is a very golden retriever type man, so very friendly.
Great show.
uh,
Yeah, out of all the shows you've done, I'll ask you two questions. Do you have a favorite?
do I have a favorite? Well, Miss Bennett, Christmas at Pemberley is like my favorite Christmas play. And like once I started watching Multiverse do it, like I fell in love with it. And I was like, I saw it every year. So when they finally won, I was like, oh my gosh. So that was kind of a dream come true. Just because how much I love it, how fun it is, how happy it is. Like it's a joy. And like when you can do a show that's a joy to do with, also the community, like all of those people, Mandy and Jason and Aaron and Emily and Lauren, of course. And we've had some great people come through as well that have worked with us on those shows. That's just like, Zach is one of my best friends as well. And like to have all these people like to work with over and over, the comfortability that you have and just the joy that you have to get back together to do these things, like that's probably my favorite.
That's funny you say that because it shows in watching the show. It's just such a sweet show and such a fun show to watch. I just love it. Do you remember out of all the shows you've done, do you remember your very first show you ever did back in Texas or what was the first one?
First show that I remember, well, I was like a child. I was like in
Okay.
fifth grade, and we did like some children's version of Cinderella where I played Cinderella's cat. It was called Attila the Cat because he was a terror and he was a big orange fluffy cat, and that was a lot of fun.
Now,
uh,
I have this idea, Alex. I may have shared it with you. I've shared it with a whole bunch of other people. I still want somebody to do a show, to be a fundraiser, where everybody recreates their first role. In other words, when you were the cat, is there a video of that anywhere? Does anybody have a record of it?
Maybe I'd have to look through my grandpa's old tapes. I'm sure he probably filmed it, but I'd have to find it. That'd be funny.
But
Um,
wouldn't that be cool that you could, again, for the people who never saw you in that performance, they could see you as the cat. I just think that'd be a lot of fun. Keep that in mind. If somebody, I keep offering it, I want to do it with somebody, be it Hart, be it you name the theater. I just think it'd be a lot of fun. Everybody would create their very first role. Out of all the roles you've done, do you have a favorite role or a role that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
favorite role, something that I want to do still. I mean, sure. Like I could, like, I'd always be down to do Hamlet, of course, and then, but like other than that, I kind of like after working on my show, it's one of those things where I'd like to find some newer things, like things that kind of break the mold a little bit. You get back out there, you can be more yourself, like I don't know, something that's just I'm looking at newer plays, different things that it's like, I don't know, tell new stories is what I'm kind of looking for.
There's one of the things I like in watching perform is I like watching the range of stuff you do. Again, I'm saying not a stereotype, but I've seen you do comedy, I've seen you do, other stuff, and it's just fun to every time to watch you. It's always a little something different, to your credit. I just think that's so great. Talk then a little bit about this and the show that you have upcoming. And it's you actually wrote this play yourself, is that correct?
Right. Yeah. It's
Oh,
not a biographical play. Um, I wrote this originally for Different Strokes Performing Arts Collective. And that was, let's see here. I performed it last year. I got the grant last year. So it would have been the year before. So 2024, I performed it for the 369 Play Festival. Um, but it would have been the end of 23 when Stephanie Hickley and Beckman reached out to be like, hey, this past summer, back in 2023, like we did the first 369 Play Festival, um, a Black, Latino, queer playwrights kind of thing. And she was like, the talkbacks that you did and the things that you talked about, a lot of that is like good material. Why don't you write something from that? Something to tell, your story. Basically being ethnically ambiguous, growing up half Chicano, half redneck, and just how people look at you, like all those stories. And I was like, okay. And it started that way. But in the midst of writing it, there was actually like a family event. Like my mom had a traumatic brain injury, and it was really scary. And so it's like, finally getting home to see her after that really influenced how the rest of the writing went. And I showed her what I was working on, and like she had some feedback, and so did my grandma. My grandma was like, "Well, that's not exactly how it happened." And my mom would be like, "No, no, no, that's how it happened."
So,
But my mom told me some new stories I didn't know. And there was like a few things, like opening it up to my family. It would also cause them to tell me stories that I didn't know, or other points of view that I didn't know from my life, things that I did, like stories I had heard my whole life. But they're like, well, there's also this, there's also that, there's these details. And that kind of fed what became the first 45-minute version of the play. And by the end of the run, even with different strokes in the second 369 play festival, it got up to an hour, because as I get up there and start telling these stories, just more comes out naturally. And the people who saw it, like, it was, some great feedback. People were like, "Yeah, get a grant. You got to turn this into a full one-man show. You got to take this on tour," like all these different things. And I was like, okay, okay. Well, let's start with the grant. I applied for the grant, and then I was able to get it from the Haywood Arts Council. Um, I got a full grant to produce it as a full one-man show. And so I worked with Elizabeth DeVault as a director, because I loved her staging. I saw her direct some things at Montford. And I was like, okay. And my dream was to do it at the Fangmeyer at Hart. And I was able to talk to Candace and do that. But I only had one weekend. And it had to be before a certain date because of the rules of the grant. So I got it in September, and I had a weekend in September. And then I had Dakota Mann, someone who I've worked with several times, also a great friend. Like, wanted to work with him on stage management for organizing the rehearsal process, lights and sound, like running everything. But it's also, my show has a lot of pictures, so it's also running the sound and the projections for, like, there's comedic timing with that too. So it's like having a DJ in your show almost. And he does great. And like, we all work together. And the point of that round of working on that show and developing it, and I'd bring them, the stories that I added, and be like, does this fit? How do you think this fits? What are we trying to say here? Or what am I trying to say? And I told them at the beginning, the overarching thing that I wanted to say with it was, from all the feedback that I got, which was surprising, was how many people related to it, how many stories were universal, and that so many people had things that they could connect to that they didn't know that they would. And I didn't know that they would either. And then realizing that, I was like, okay, well, let's tell some more stories. Let's all string it together for the lessons that I learned in life. And then at the end of it, I want everyone to see it as like, oh, this is just a story, or these are different stories that can be universal, that anyone can relate to. It doesn't matter that he's a Chicano man. You could be anybody, and there's something in there that you can relate to. And it's like, when people start seeing it as like, oh, we all have a human experience, they start to lose that, like, seeing people as other, seeing people as, something to be scared of or something to be suspicious of. And we have a lot of that in our country right now, that's been, kind of fanning the flames. And it's like, well, if people see more stories that are like, these are someone that you're being told are different than you, or might not be as American as you, and then you find out their stories, and you're like, wait a minute, like, they're just like me, or they've dealt with things that I've dealt with. And then it kind of brings everybody back down to earth of like, oh, we're all the same.
now you
And that
mentioned
was the point.
you
Um,
mentioned that you'd done this last year, and I'm sorry I missed that performance. That was at Hart also. Was that at Thangmeyer?
yeah, that was in the Fangmeyer. So now I'll be in the Fighter Studio. So that's coming up this weekend and next weekend. And I was able, Candace loved it so much. She had offered to bring it back for the studio season. And that was something I was looking forward to, because I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it was also like, the response for the full show was so powerful. Like, being in there and people's reactions, from laughing, crying, and then like standing ovation. Like, there was people stomping, like, at the end, and I'd never had that happen before. I was like, oh, okay. But the reaction, like then it got nominated for best solo performance with Broadway World, the Charlotte region. So I ended up winning best solo performance um, for Broadway World, the Charlotte region, and like I got that award I think in January. Like the voting went all the way through December, and since my show was in September, like the cutoff was October. So it got pitched in there to Dakota Mann, who is my stage manager. You know, submitted it, and they accepted, and it got nominated, and everyone got behind it, and it now it's an award-winning show. And it's just one of those things that it's just like it's overwhelming a little bit. The reaction from the very beginning, from the 45-minute version to the reaction when I did the full one-man show, and then getting an award, and now it's like it's going back up, and people want to see it, and people are getting connected with wanting to take it on tour back in Texas or New York or in California, and it's just one of these things. I was like, wow, it is shocking to me that I never realized that my own story, like this is like true stories, that my own story would be something that could also propel my career as an actor or writer. And it's funny how things just kind of all come around.
Well, propelling your career, we can now add to the fact that you've also been on the Blaine's World show talking about it. So that's up there with
Yeah, there
all
you go.
this other stuff as well. Do we eventually get to see the musical version of this?
Well, maybe one day I'll talk to Lin Manuel. We'll see what happens.
I can see it. But that's very exciting. So now you have a final version. So it's 2 hours with an intermission. So after this current run, do you have any plans for taking it on the road or going further with it?
I plan to. I'm currently trying to pitch it to some theaters and people that I'm connected with back in Texas. I have some friends that are also connected with, you know, theaters in Greenville and South Carolina and in Atlanta. Um, and then I have another friend who's connected in New York. So it just depends. It's like what to do with a story like this, and but I think it could do well. Like there's a lot of the feedback I got too is like these are stories about people that nobody really hears about, um, and that other people can connect to. That it's like, oh, that's my story. That's like I dealt with that. I dealt with being ethnically ambiguous. I dealt with coming from two different cultures and backgrounds in America, the melting pot, and but no one kind of really pinpoints what those things are. And so it's like to find something like a story that so many people can connect to that they haven't seen before. It's different, and people have been reaching out that they want to see it or that they want to produce it. And I was like, okay, well, let's look at it.
When you were a kid living it, did you think to yourself that it's kind of a life that, was kind of unusual or that other people might want to hear about?
No, that was the thing. That and I think that's what shocked me getting the stories out in the first place. Like even with the 369 Play Festival, I thought it was just going to be filler in between other plays, and like I was at no point did I think that it was unique or special. And it's just like, and I think it's more about the fact that it's true and that there's other people that experience similar things and they haven't heard anyone else tell it. And I can tell it in a way that is, personal and yet performative. And it's like it is one of those things of like where you just tap into being the storyteller. You sit around the fire, you're having drinks, you're telling stories to your friends, and that's kind of the joy in that.
Storytelling is big in Asheville. Before you put the show together, had you ever thought of yourself as a storyteller?
No, I think it's funny. Like I've seen different things of opinions from actors on being called a storyteller.
Right.
There's some people who are like, I'm not a storyteller, I'm just an actor. Because there's a difference. Like there's certain actors where it's like, no, I didn't write this. I'm just giving it my voice. I'm not telling the story. I'm just acting it out. And there's other people who adamantly are like, oh, I'm a storyteller. I'm this or that and these and those. But it's like I find that more in playwrights. Playwrights are more storytellers. But like as an actor who also writes, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm a storyteller. Like I enjoy that. That's a certain skill set. But I feel like storytelling kind of relates more back to, you know, culturally, the history of humans, of how we've told stories over generations, how history became legends, how, you see it a lot in Native American stories, but you take it back also to, the Vikings, the Greeks, the Romans, ancient Mesopotamia, like all kinds of stories, even back to ancient Egyptians. Like it went back and went back and went back, and the stories get told repeatedly over millennia. And like you'll see the same stories even in religions that have the same kind of plot points. That type of storytelling is, I think, innate to humans. And it's like there's some people who just thrive on that. And it's like those are the people that you just love listening to, the people that might enter the theater, but it's like they connect with the audience in a different way. Um, the people that are good at breaking the fourth wall or talking directly to the audience, your actors who are so strong in Shakespeare and improv, the things that included the audience. Um, I think those are more the people who'd be comfortable being called storytellers. And then there's some people who won't. Um,
Alex, before you did this show, had you ever done a one-man show?
no, no.
Just, I
Now
think,
I'm like thinking about it. I was like, I don't, I don't think so.
I think out
Um,
loud. I'm thinking out loud with you, Alex. I kid a little bit in the sense that the one advantage to doing this as one-man show is that if you mess up a line, the only person who's going to know is you versus your director, perhaps. So I mean, is that does it change each performance a little bit, or does it stay the same?
It, I think it changes each performance just a little bit. Like now that what I did after the last performance, I realized what comes out of my mouth versus what I wrote down. It's like I write much more intelligently than I speak. And how I say things and tell stories is much more colloquial and relatable than how I wrote it. And I realized as I was like, I watched a recording of the last performance and I go back through my script, so I have one screen with the performance and one screen with my script. And I'm kind of going through and checking it. What did I actually say? How did I say that? It's like I'm saying the same things, but like on paper, I was like, that's way too smart. No one talks like that. Like, like that's what you read in a book. And so it's like having basically two different versions of my script, the one that I say and the one that you would prefer to read. Um, and then also it's like there might have been a different phrasing, or maybe that's like there's like a little bit of more background in a story that got added in live performance based on the audience. It's like if there's reactions in the audience of like you can kind of feel it where they'll react to you and be like, oh well, they thought something was particularly funny or they thought something was particularly interesting, and that makes me elaborate a little bit more. But I made sure to put that back into the script, and I was like, okay, I have to be prepared for this. Let me make sure that's in the script so that it's like, okay, these are the things that you know, these are the things that you can say. But I've read. It was funny, like in studying this, like how do you write a one man show? Like I went and got John Leguizamo's stand up, like what he wrote for his one man shows. And what he wrote really was more of like a summary of his show. And then it's like with like, so all he had were these summaries of his life and the story that he was telling, but in performance it was completely different. Like it was so much more. There was so much. He didn't write in all of the family members that he acted out. Like he just gave like a summary, like it was like a book. But in performance, he was actually acting out all the things that was happening between all the people. And when I first worked on this show, that was kind of the advice I got from Stephanie Hickling Beckman and Rodney Smith, because like Stephanie was producing and Rodney was directing that first kind of bit, and that was kind of the feedback. It started as more of a telling the story, and then it became it's like, well, your characterizations and things like you can elaborate more on that, really act out all the different people that you talk about. And it started with just a few people, a few family members, and then it turned into like as I got to the final performance, I realized what I wrote versus what I performed. Like I performed way more of the people that I mentioned and acted them out than how I originally wrote it, which is also what I saw in the writings of John Leguizamo.
By the way,
Um,
will we get to meet then? So when we see the show, will we get to meet your family members as well?
my mom will be there opening night, so she'll be there this Friday and Saturday with her best friend, Amy, who we actually lived with when I was like a toddler. Like we were all roommates.
But
Uh,
are they depicted in the play as well?
just my mom. The only story I have about Amy is about when she stopped me from microwaving my cat when I was like 3 years old. I put the cat in the microwave thinking I was going to send him to outer space, and I wasn't going to press start. But as a child, like an adult doesn't know what a child's going to do. But it was one of those things where I was like, no, it's like a beam me up, Scotty kind of thing. Like I'm sending them to the spaceship. But if say any accident would have happened, that would have been really traumatic.
You mentioned something else I'm wondering also. You mentioned some of the books. Will there eventually be a book of this, or are you going to put it together in writing with pictures?
I don't know. Like that's a good question. That would be as far as the material I could. Like now that I've written out like a colloquial version of the script that I actually say, and then I have the original version that is more like a book. Yeah, it could be something we put together. And like if it was published, it'd basically be just to keep the copyright so no one steals my story.
Well, that would be hard to steal the story. Um, where do you see it then in terms of this is running through the next couple of weeks, and we'll see your life through this point in time. Do you see yourself having a part two of this down the road?
Um, Not this story. I could tell different stories that are still autobiographical or based on life. But as I start, when I've thought about that, it's like, the other two stories, or maybe just the other story to tell, is more on the relationships in my life, like friends, best friends, romantic relationships, but also like my brother and my sisters, like those relationships, like things that get out of like some of the stories in this play get a little deeper on like my relationships with my parents, but it's more surface level. I feel like with a lot of things that can happen in a family, like you can get much more personal about like your siblings and the things that y'all dealt with or whatever the case may be. And there's lots of plays like that, like August Osage County and stuff like that. There could be more centered plays that I could write, but if it was going to be like, I don't think I could do another one man show based on the stories that I have. I think it would have to be either a two-person show, especially when it came to relationships, or like a small cast or like a small play that can still jump through time, they can still tell different stories, but it would need multiple actors. Like I don't think I necessarily have like another one person show like in my head. The things that I have next involve more people.
And if you would, Alex, just as we wind down here, talk a little bit about the writing process of this. In other words, are you the kind of guy, you just sit down at a typewriter and or a computer and write for 3 hours a day, or is that how you process it, or how do you write this whole thing?
As far as the writing process, it was more of like I'd start just telling, like I'd just start writing any story I could remember, anything that I'd experienced, a story that I've told before, um, and just go from there. And it could be anywhere at any point in time in my life. Just a story about dealing with probably like the first time someone was racist towards me, and then the second time, and then um, and then kind of writing those down, and then from those 2 points in my life, writing about things that were happening around that time, and then even taking it back to then the story of my parents and how I was born, their relationship, and it just like it all. It's like okay, well, I start telling this story. This story also involves my mom. Well, let me tell you more about my mom. And this story had to do with my dad. So let me tell you a bit more about him. Well, let me tell you about both of them and how this all started. And so it's like I pick one point, and then something out of that one point turns into, it's like, well, I have to tell you more about this thing. Well, then I got to tell you more about this. And then so as I started telling all those stories, I began to, it's like, okay, well, what fits here? What story can I tell? And what lesson was learned that can kind of, you know, arch that into the next story? Or how does that connect? What's the through thought? And then it's like, so it could lead to another story. Or it's like, okay, these are some interesting stories from my life. How do I connect it? And so as I started writing it all out, at times it was linear, but then I'd have to move things after I wrote it to be like say for example, the ending of my play was originally written in the middle of it, but it was so kind of powerful that I was like, I'm going to move that. I'm just going to break this story up, put this at the end, and then just go back to it. And in terms of like one man shows or stand up comedy specials, you'll notice there's maybe a joke, like a repeating joke, like that they always go back to, or a story or a phrase that they reference it like throughout the play, and then they also, it's like maybe the biggest one throughout the show is referenced then back at the end. And so it's like I kind of did the same setup as I set up the framing of this show. And so it's like the show starts now with just like, it's basically an introduction. There's a framework now to where the setting is and the experience that we all had. And that was the other thing, is like giving it a framework kind of set up where to tell stories and where to cut them off, and things like that. Like as far as like where to put the intermission. And the framework is set in my basement during Hurricane Helene. So it's like you tell that story, but like how long will that story be, relatable? Like if this goes on the road, is that something that's still relatable? Is that something that can be communicated to the same audiences, or is it going to need more explanation, or am I going to need to just change the framework? And
Alex,
that's kind of a question.
from an age standpoint, who would this be appropriate for?
Oh, most likely, it PG-13 and up. I do curse. I curse a lot. So cuss words aren't always great for the younger kids and things like that. But so I'd say, yeah, what is it, PG-13 or TV-14 that they do on ratings?
So I mean,
I'd say, yeah, teenagers and up. And then,
it's okay for me
but
to
it
say.
doesn't. There's nothing like too graphic. I do tell a story of dealing with like some violence, and like there is a mention of an assault on young ladies that had happened in another country, but it was like I had to report about it because like I was the one that kind of ran off these guys and like that type of story. And so um, there's certain things I'd say it's like, yeah, I'm sure, and nothing's like too graphic or anything like that. So yeah, PG-13.
And Alex, if folks want to see the show, if you can give the dates and where it's going to be and how to get tickets.
Yes, the show. So it will be at Heart in Waynesville. And it goes up this weekend. It's going to be in the Fighter Studio Friday and Saturday. This is the 20th and the 21st. That is at 7:30. And then the 22nd, this Sunday at 2. And then next weekend, next weekend is going to be the 27th through the 29th. Again, Friday, Saturday, 7:30, Sunday at 2. You can get your tickets at hearttheater.org. There's like a little poster of me right on the cover. Like you just click on that, it'll take you to the show.
And by the way, we spell, for the folks who don't know it, we spell theater the correct way with an R-E.
It's the British way, technically.
Well, actually, I think to Art's credit, I think they have it. You can punch in either way. You'll get there as well. And
Oh, nice.
last question, Alex. After this is over, in other words, this could be busy for the next couple of weeks. What else is on your agenda?
After this, I'm working with Attic Salt on Venus and Fur. and that goes up in the middle of April. So that is April, I believe, 10th through the 17th. Let me see here. It is. I can tell you. So April. I'm pretty sure that was right. What I just said. Yeah, April 10th. 10th through the 19th. Oh man. And then so that'll be great. It's just a two-person show, so it's me and Kate McGonigal, and it is directed by Jeff Catanese, who is also my director. Like when I first started working for Bright Star Touring Theater back in 2011, 2012, one of the first shows I did at Montford. So um,
Comes
yeah,
on focus. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for being my guest this edition of the Blaine's World podcast. Also, I thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the show itself. I missed it last time around, so I'll catch you this time around. And as always, Alex, be amazing. Thanks, man.
thank you.